Ambassador Borovic, how are you?
Morning. Good morning. I would like to welcome you from Phnom Penh.
Let me turn my video on. Oh, yeah.
Oh, hi. I am Ambassador. So today is a great day. We will exchange with our assessment, our impression about the history of our friendly and long-standing bilateral relations.
So, dear colleagues, I think we can proceed with starting the roundtable, which will be broadcast online. And I'm happy to welcome you from the part of Russian International Affairs Council. My name is Ksenia Kuzmina. I'm the program manager for Asia Pacific, and I will serve as a moderator of this meeting. And it's my pleasure and honor to start the high-level opening session. It's a pity we are celebrating the 65 years anniversary of diplomatic relations between Russia and the Kingdom of Cambodia amidst the pandemic, but still it gives us new opportunity. So it gave us an opportunity to bring together such representative group both from Russia and Cambodia, and we are honored to be joined by both the ambassador of Russia to the Kingdom of Cambodia and the ambassador of the Kingdom of Cambodia to Russia. And first, I would like to give floor to his opening remarks to Russian International Affairs Council Director General, Dr. Andrei Kortunov. Andrei Vladimirovich, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ksenia. First of all, on behalf of the Russian International Affairs Council, let me warmly welcome all participants to this webinar. I'm very glad to see some of my old friends here, people who are really well known in the area of Southeast Asia studies. And it gives me a particular pleasure to welcome the two ambassadors who found time in their busy schedules to take part in our discussion. So we are privileged to have His Excellency Ambassador Anatoly Borovic and His Excellency Ambassador Sailor Eid. I'm sure that they will bring another dimension to the discussion, moving it beyond traditional academic exchanges and adding a practical political dimension to what we are going to discuss today. The title of the webinar is the 65 years of diplomatic relations between the Russian Federation and the Kingdom of Cambodia. But of course, in this audience, I do not need to mention that our relationship have a much deeper history. And indeed, this relationship goes beyond the 65 years of diplomatic relations. I'm sure that people like Dmitry Mosikov can tell us a lot about history of this relationship that goes through ages. But even if we limit ourselves to the last 65 years, of course, it's a dramatic history. This relationship had its ups and downs. We had very positive developments, but also a lot of negative factors affecting the relationship. So it was a bumpy road for both countries. And definitely this bumpy road gives us many reasons to reflect not just on the past, but also on the future. However, no matter what level of diplomatic relationship we had over the last 65 years, I think there was one thing that remained constant, one thing that has not really changed over 65 years, And I think that was a feeling of deep affinity towards each other. Russian people and people of Cambodia had very positive attitudes towards each other. And I think these positive attitude survived all the bumps on the road of the diplomatic relations. And I think this is an asset that should be preserved and that should be developed further. Of course, we can talk about the past, but we should think about the future. And today, both countries face many challenges and they explore many new opportunities. It would be clearly premature to state that the Russian Federation and the Kingdom of Cambodia have already entered a post-COVID world. Unfortunately, it's not the case. Both countries are still struggling with the global pandemic. We still don't know whether we have a third wave, whether the vaccination will take care of it, or we will still have very difficult times ahead of us. But what we know for sure is that the world is changing, and the world will not get back to where it was before the pandemic, before the global economic recession caused by the pandemic, before these multiple changes in the international relations and the new balance of powers that we see emerging in Asia, but also at the global level. Of course, these changes have a very clear impact on our two countries. We have to position ourselves in this changing world. And definitely, as I said, this world creates both challenges and opportunities for our two countries and our two societies. Let me say that in my humble opinion, the potential of cooperation between Russia and Cambodia is very substantial, and it's clearly not depleted. On the contrary, we can observe that unfortunately our bilateral trade is almost negligible, and definitely it has to be upgraded. We can also talk about the Russian-Cambodian cooperation in the context of regional and trans-regional trends, such as attempts to build a stronger partnership between the Eurasian Economic Union and ASEAN. We should probably consider recent developments in Asia, like the signing of the Comprehensive Regional Economic Partnership, which Cambodia is a part of. Definitely, this is something that might affect our relations in future. I don't want to take too much of your time. I'm not an expert on the bilateral relations, but let me just conclude by saying that when you have a very dynamic situation in the world, when you have rapid changes, a lot of independent variables affecting the situation, which are very difficult to predict, the value of expert and academic exchanges grows. So I think that events like the one that we launched today are important, valuable, and I hope that the conversation that we start today will continue. I hope that we can involve not just academics, but also practitioners, people from the private sector. I hope that we can dig deeper in the relationship, looking not just at the accomplishments, but also at the problems that have not yet been resolved or even properly addressed. So there is a lot to do. but you know, we have to start with something, and I do hope that this conversation today will be an ideal launching pad for long-term and productive cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrei Vadimovich, for giving such a start and a broad context for our further discussion. And I'm honored to give floor to His Excellency Anatoly Borovik, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the Russian Federation to the Kingdom of Cambodia.
Dear Russian and Cambodian friends and colleagues, I am pleased to participate in the discussion dedicated to the 65th anniversary since the establishment of bilateral diplomatic relations, together with top-level experts on this matter. This year is very remarkable for our two nations. Today, video conference is an integral part of the anniversary celebrations. Our two nations have cherished long-standing relations based on friendship and mutual trust, and Cambodia is a reliable partner of Russia in Asia-Pacific region. My personal exploration of Cambodia started long ago in 1984. A lot changed since that time, except one thing, the willingness of both Russia and Cambodia to closely cooperate with each other. The novel coronavirus pandemic affected every country in the world, hitting many sectors of economy, disrupting planned joint events. We welcome the prompt measures of the royal government of Cambodia to stop the spread of the disease. During the past year, the kingdom efficiently contained the epidemic, still illustrating relatively low figure of contamination cases. The Russian side believes that the current COVID outbreak will also be effectively tackled. We are pleased with intensity of bilateral political dialogue and stand for the continuation of interaction on the highest level. In 2015, Dmitry Medvedev, the Prime Minister of the Russian Federation, paid a visit to the kingdom, the first arrival of the head of the Russian government to Cambodia in the history of our bilateral relations. In 2016, Prime Minister Hun Sen paid his visit to Moscow and then to Sochi, where he participated in the 20th Russia-ASEAN Dialogue Summit and met the President of the Russian Federation, Mr. Vladimir Putin. The regular contacts have contributed to the consistent development of bilateral relations and expanded mutual understanding between our countries. The interparliamentary dimension preserved its importance with the delegation exchanges advanced and continued in the recent years, both between the lower and upper chambers of our parliament. The inter-party cooperation has also been developed, primarily between the Cambodian People's Party and the All-Russian Political Party United Russia. In 2015, the ties between the two parties were strengthened by signing the agreement on interaction and cooperation. Despite of coronavirus outbreak, our countries continue to interact via video conference. In this regard, I would like to know the mutually beneficial cooperation between the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Cambodia and the Russian Embassy in Phnom Penh. I extend the gratitude for the Kingdom's support and co-sponsorship of initiatives within the international platforms as UN, SM, and ASEAN, and support of the Russian candidates to international posting. Both states demonstrate solidarity in the matters of information security, countering the pandemic, and the dissemination of weapons of mass destruction. We reaffirm our support of Cambodia hosting the 13th SM Summit later this year. The chairmanship of the Kingdom in this major event confirmed the international recognition of successes attained by the nation over the past decades. The Russian side is convinced in the need to fully use the potential of this forum to promote practical cooperation and interconnectivity between the region. Russia is open to cooperation with Cambodian colleagues at the whole scope of multilateral regional mechanisms such as the ASEAN Regional Forum, ASEAN Defense Ministerial Meeting Plus, Asian Summit, Conference on International and Confidence Building Measures in Asia. These developments are even more important since Cambodia becomes the coordinator of Russia-ASEAN relations this year and the ASEAN chair in 2022. The Russian Federation supports the idea of mutual interaction among ASEAN, Euro-Asian Economic Union, and Shanghai Cooperation Organization, experience exchange in integration processes, as well as stands for the formation of the Russian President Vladimir Putin proposed inclusive and open Greater Euro-Asian Partnership. Intensification of commercial exchanges between Russia and Cambodia is one of our key objectives. Both countries have consistently worked together on building up economic links and creating conditions for inciting business activity. Unfortunately, last year, our bilateral turnover has fallen 90%, was quite modest. However, we feel the numbers will rise after the end of the COVID pandemic. Russia always supported Cambodia in the sphere of technology, and we think that the digital economy may become a new growth driver of the cooperation. Our country possesses the whole range of critical technologies, including platforms for medicine, education, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, smart city, and is open for the implementation of the initiative. We are also interested in deepening interaction in energy, including the nuclear one, machinery, construction, and agriculture. Apart from the large-scale companies such as Rosatom and Mirator, some medium-level enterprises are also keen to enter the kingdom, including ISAR and Beluga Group. We see that some companies are already used preferential loans provided by the Russian Export Center to finance such projects. The interaction between Russia and Cambodia in the humanitarian field is one of the most steadily developing components of our bilateral relations. In the recent years, there has been a marked increase of participation in cultural events. There are more direct contacts in youth exchanges. The Russian side is satisfied with the result of cooperation in education, is ready to further assist in nourishing Cambodian specialists. The important role in promoting bilateral humanitarian exchanges belongs to the Russian Center of Science and Culture in Phnom Penh. After the resumption of operation, they have launched the classes of Russian language and now attract more former USSR and Russia students from Cambodia to the various initiatives. In concluding my opening remark, I would like to thank you to the Russian International Affairs Council, as well as the fellow experts that joined our event today. Russia and Cambodia have traditionally been friends, and I do believe that the friendly and mutually beneficial approach will be preserved in the future ahead. Taking this opportunity, I would like to congratulate all of you with the jubilee of our bilateral relation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for your very interesting speech that gave us a broad highlights all the main dynamics of both political, international, economic, and other types of cooperation between Russia and the Kingdom of Cambodia. And I would also like us to especially thank you and the embassy for the great support affected to us during the preparations of this roundtable. And with that, I'm honored to give floor to the Ambassador Extraordinary Plenipotentiary of the Kingdom of Cambodia to the Russian Federation, His Excellency Seyla Eid. Please, Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Once again, good morning from Moscow. Excellency Mr. Anatoly Borovich, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the Russian Federation to the Kingdom of Cambodia. Excellency Mr. Andrei Kotonov, Director General of the Russian International Affairs Council. Distinguished expert from Russia and Cambodia. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, on behalf of Cambodia, I would like to express my sincere thanks to the Russian International Affairs Council for organizing this online roundtable discussion dedicated to the 65th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between Cambodia and Russia. My gratitude is also extended to the Embassy of the Russian Federation to the Kingdom of Cambodia for supporting this event. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the establishment of diplomatic relations between our two countries dates back to 1956. And in December 1991, Cambodia declared recognition of the Russian Federation as the successor of the former Soviet Union. We have a long history of friendly relations, despite going through many political stages in the past, except during the period when Cambodia was under the genocidal regime of Pol Pot from 1975 to 1979. The people of Cambodia never forget the valuable support from Russia during our most difficult time in the 1980s, when we were struggling to survive and rebuild our nation from ashes of destruction left by the genocidal Pol Pot regime, as well as engulfing with protracted civil war and severe economic sanctions from many powers in the world. And then Russia played a key role in Cambodia's peace process in the 1990s. Now, under the wise leadership of Multilateral Prime Minister Hun Sen, Cambodia has developed itself in all fronts. From a country that once needed food aid and UN peacekeeper, Cambodia now is a major rice exporting country and has been actively contributing to peacekeeping in many countries under the UN umbrella. I'm delighted to see that our country, Cambodia and Russia, have maintained frequent high-level exchange, which have enhanced political trust between our nations and keep our cordial traditional friendship strong. Our Prime Minister's meeting at the sideline of the 14th East Asia Summit in Bangkok in 2019, for instance, reinforce our shared commitment and further strengthening and expanding cooperation under bilateral and multilateral frameworks to serve the interests of both our peoples. During the credential presenting ceremony in Kremlin in February 2020, where regarding Cambodia as friend and partner of Russia, His Excellency Vladimir Putin, President of the Russian Federation, reaffirmed Russia's interest in further developing closer relations between our two countries in diverse areas, including politics and security, trade and investment, as well as social culture fields such as education, people-to-people exchanges. At this point, I'm pleased to note the steady growth of excellent cooperation between our two countries in many fields, starting from 2001, such as defense and security, law enforcement, information technology, trade, investment, tourism, education, and culture. However, the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic has hampered the progress we made thus far. While addressing economic recovery, I think we need to pay more attention to our trade relations and investment, especially in the sphere of agriculture. I would like to take this opportunity to invite more Russian companies to invest in Cambodia, especially in food processing, agro industry, and production of rubber, cashew nut, and rice. On multilateral cooperation, Cambodia attaches great importance to the cooperation with Eurasian Economic Union, EAEU. We are grateful for Russia's support for the negotiation on the free trade agreement between Cambodia and Eurasian Economic Union. In September 2019, Cambodia submitted its formal request for early commencement of the FTA negotiations. Hopefully, the upcoming third meeting of the Cambodia EEC working group will be able to work something out soon. In August this year, Cambodia will take over the role as ASEAN-Russia partnership coordinator and is looking forward to working with other ASEAN member states and Russia to achieve more fruitful outcomes for our peoples and regions. Cambodia and Russia could work
I'm afraid we have a sound problem for his. Your Excellency, can you hear us well? Your Excellency, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, now we can hear you too.
Okay, good. Let me continue.
Excellent.
Can you hear me now? Yes.
Yes, we can hear you well. Thank you.
Okay. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. The current Asia-Pacific region has become a fragile hotbed for sharp contests among power players in the region. Some countries have even changed their courses to adjust their interests in the Pacific. Despite all these changes, Cambodia and Russia still have the similar interests of maintaining peace, stability, and prosperous growth in the region. We both have rebalanced our strategy vis-à-vis the changing trends in the Asia-Pacific. Hence, I do hope that in the course of discussion here today, our expert will work out new way to help our two governments to further converge their strategic cooperation in various fields such as economic development, addressing climate change, combating international terrorism, pandemic or transitional crime, etc. I also believe that Cambodia and Russia should establish a platform of expert level on various fields such as political security, trade and investment, education, and social culture. The expert should identify any setbacks in our traditional sphere of cooperation that could hinder the healthy growth of our relation and thus find ways forward to further forging closer cooperation both in bilateral and multilateral frameworks. Leaving this finding to our expert today, I would like to conclude my opening remarks with a big wish of successful discussion and fruitful outcomes to our roundtable discussion today. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for joining us today and for your very interesting speech, highlighting also not only the promising spheres for bilateral cooperation between Russia and the Kingdom of Cambodia, especially agriculture, but also the regional context of Moscow-Phnom Penh collaboration. And with that, we are happy to conclude the opening session and proceed with the main discussional session. I'm happy that we are joined today by a representative group of Cambodian and Russian scholars. From Russia today, we have Dmitry Mosakov, head of the Center for the Study of the Southeast Asia of the Institute of Oriental Studies of the Russian Academy of Sciences, Ekaterina Koldunova from the ASEAN Center at MGIMO University, Elena Burova, Research Fellow of the Institute of Far Eastern Studies of the Russian Academy of Sciences, and Evgeny Kanaev, head of the Asia-Pacific Department of the Higher School of Economics, and Dr. Ivan Timofeyev, Director of Programs of the Russian International Affairs Council. And from Cambodia, we are also joined by a very representative group of experts. Today, we have with us Vanerit Chen, President of the Asian Vision Institute, Phea Kim, Director General of the International Relations Institute of the Royal Academy of Cambodia, Samnan Tien, Director of the National Institute of Diplomacy and International Relations, and we are also happy to be joined by the Russian Center of Science and Culture and in Phnom Penh, a representative by Mr. Phan Barey. Thank you all so much for joining us today. So I also wish to welcome the audience, which can follow us now live on YouTube and Facebook. And I kindly ask you to, if you have any questions to the distinguished speakers, to leave them in the comment section. And after the main speeches and the discussion, we will read them out, and there will be an opportunity for discussion. And now I would like to proceed with the speeches. And first, we would like to invite Dmitry Mosakov from the Russian Institute of Oriental Studies. As we know that Professor Mosakov will have to leave us a bit earlier. Please, the floor is yours.
I'm very glad to take part in this great conference. Thank you greatly. And I want to speak about some main periods during this diplomatic history. I think that the first period began in 1995 when Prince Norodom Sihanouk, head of the country at that time, visited Soviet Union, and first great agreements about cooperations and about help from Soviet Union to Cambodian side was signed. It was a great period when the first group of Russian students began to study Cambodian language. And when in the Soviet Union, they began to study not only language, but the culture of Cambodia, Cambodian politics, Cambodian history. So it was a very interesting period when Russia began to open Cambodia, not only from political point of view, but also from cultural, historical point of view. We have prepared great specialists who went to Cambodia. They began to work as interpreters. They wrote great study books and textbooks. And so I think it was the very good beginning of the Russian-Cambodian relations. We can remember different negotiations between Russian leaders, not Russian, but leaders of Soviet Union, with Norodom Sihanouk, with other leaders of Cambodia, with Sim Wagner, Norodom Sihanouk, and other great persons of that period of Cambodian history. We could see great ties in medicine. We know about the hospital of Cambodian Soviet friendship that was built at that time, about technological institute with the Russian specialists who worked there, some enterprises that were built at that time in Cambodia. And the main, I think that the main idea and the main result of all these connections was the atmosphere of trust between Cambodian side and Soviet side. But then the situation changed. I think that this first period dramatically changed in 1970 after the coup d'etat in Phnom Penh, when Lon Nol and came to power, and Sihanouk left. He didn't have any possibility to come back to Phnom Penh. He came to Moscow. He wanted to stay here in Moscow, but situation was very difficult, was very undetermined, and he went to Peking, and there he stayed, and there he became the leader of the national movement against Lon Nol. It was a catastrophe for Soviet Cambodian relations, because for the first time in Soviet Union they didn't support Sihanouk, and for a long period of time that was a very severe, from my point of view, mistake, and we could feel the consequences of that decision for a long time, even I think during the next period of Russian-Cambodian relations. And I see we know a lot of accidents when Soviet representatives wanted to have some relations with Cambodian revolutionary forces, but this decision not to support them in 1970 was a great mistake. And then a new period in Cambodian Soviet relations began after the liberation of Phnom Penh in 1979. Once again, Soviet Union came to Cambodia as a main supporter, as a force that support in technological field, sphere of culture, sphere of information, and supported much Cambodian population, because the danger of starvation in 1980 and 1981 was real, and a lot of products from Soviet Union came to Cambodia and helped people there to continue working, to continue living in this country. And so Soviet Union became one of the main areas of new Cambodia, and made a lot for the development of Cambodia, to make People's Republic of Cambodia really a sovereign state with a developing economy, and with a developing culture, and with a developing influence on international affairs. And then I think Soviet Union took great role in making this international operation for peace in Cambodia, because you know that the meetings between Heng Samrin and Mr. Gorbachev, that was the beginning of the peaceful process in Cambodia, because after this meeting there was a decision to begin great connection with the opposition forces of Cambodia, and at last this finished with a great with the Kingdom of Cambodia #2. And once again, you see, the decay of the Soviet Union didn't give opportunity for Soviet or now Russian influence to come into Cambodia, because the situation was that Soviet Union made a lot for peaceful process, but when this peaceful process received great success, the Soviet Union was in decay. And then began new and modern stage in Russian-Cambodian relations. I think very slowly, step by step, we go up and up in our relations. And I think that the main thing there today is the atmosphere of trust. Once again, you see, because Soviet Union in all the situation was on the side of Cambodian people, was on the side of Cambodian authorities, and gave great support for in international sphere, not only international sphere, but also in internal relations. And I think that this very difficult experience, you see, experience of great ups and great downs, you see, now can help us in developing further step by step in different spheres. First of all, in economics, in politics, in culture, in history, because we have a huge amount of spheres for our common cooperation. And I believe that this experience of 65 years of common relations will give us new impulse for the future, for developing these relations to go up. And once again, I think in future, Russia will be one of the best allies and one of the great supporters of Cambodian government, of Cambodian political forces, and of Cambodian development. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Morsekov, for such a, I'd say, historical overview and the general context of Russian-Cambodian relations. And I think it's very important that today we focus on both the history of our relation to better understand the attitudes of the two peoples and the broad atmosphere and the broad context of the development of bilateral relations. But at the same time, we are trying to pay attention to the current state of relations and the promising areas, for example, in agriculture or new technologies or security. And we are also trying to encompass the regional contexts and the regional issues that are now faced by both Russia and Cambodia, and also look into the opportunities for multilateral collaboration of the two countries in the context of ASEAN and other international platforms, for example, in the context of Cambodian relations with the Eurasian Economic Union. And now I'm happy to give floor to our next speaker, representative of the Cambodian side, Vanari Chen, President of the Asian Vision Institute. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sneha, Excellency Ambassador Anatoly Borovic, Excellency Ambassador Sayla Iet, and Excellency Andrei Putunov, distinguished friends and colleagues. It is my great honor and pleasure to celebrate this 35th anniversary of Cambodia-Russia relations. I just would like to reinforce the previous statements that this tradition of friendship and partnership is deep and resilient. But the challenge we are facing is we haven't fully used the political capital that we have. So in other words, we still have a huge room to play, a huge potential to realize, especially when it comes to economic relationship. Because as you all know, Cambodia has recently given priority to economic diplomacy. In other words, foreign policy is a means to serve economic interests. So that is the foreign policy objective of Cambodia. And I hope that Russia will enhance more this economic cooperation with Cambodia. So now let me turn to the global and regional geopolitical and geo-economic landscape and how our bilateral relationship can shape as well as can enhance these multilateral systems. Cambodian foreign policy has been consistent in terms of promoting open, inclusive, and rule-based international system, multilateral system. So that is the kind of the pillar of Cambodian foreign policy when it comes to multilateralism. So how to make it more inclusive, more just and fair, so that the voices of small states, the voices of middle powers, and the voices of regional and international institutions can be heard in this multilateral system. Russia and Cambodia have been actively coordinated even in enhancing this multilateral system. I just would like to take the example of ASEAN-Russia relation, which now we in the process of discussing developing a next 5-year kind of strategic partnership plan or roadmap between ASEAN and Russia. And Cambodia play a pivotal role in bringing Russia to this vision. we may recall when East Asia Summit decided to expand from ASEAN +6 to ASEAN +8, including Russia and the United States. Cambodia was very active in bringing Russia in the East Asia Summit, and also the regional interest, because we want to see a more balanced regional geostrategic in this region, and Russia play important role in building this a more kind of strategic equilibrium in the Asia Pacific regions. And in this process, that Cambodia as a kind of coordinating country for ASEAN Russia relation, I think down the road, Cambodia can contribute more to the deepening and the advancements of comprehensive partnership between ASEAN and Russia. Some of the key areas that I think Russia can explore in enhancing its presence in this region is through energy sector. So energy is emerging sector that we can cooperate, a very important sector. Of course, relating to the energy, perhaps ASEAN and Russia can work together on climate change, mitigation and adaptation, because the climate change have been now getting to be the key agenda of ASEAN in the multilateral diplomacy. So these some of the areas: energy, climate change, and other non-traditional security issues such as transnational crimes will be something that Russia can contribute more to ASEAN. When it comes to economic diplomacy, Cambodia, as Excellency Ambassador Saila mentioned earlier, that Cambodia really interested in joining the Euro-Asian Economic Union, which is, contribute, which accounts for 3.2% of the global GDP, with a total GDP of more than $1 trillion. So that is an emerging kind of growth center in the Euro-Asian continent that Cambodia can tap into this economic potential, and Cambodia have a potential role to play in connecting ASEAN economy or regional economy in East Asia with the Euro-Asian Economic Union. And last year we signed the Regional Comprehensive Economics among the 15 countries, ASEAN +5. This would going to be a very dynamic economic regions that Cambodia can play a role bridging this dynamic, economically robust region with Euro-Asian continents. So that is the bridging role that Cambodia can play when it comes to economic connectivities. Last point I want to make here is our people-to-people ties down the road. Many Cambodian leaders, both in the public, private, and civil societies, have graduated from Russia. So this kind of golden bridge, a human bridge between the two people, very strong, very fundamental, and this is something that make our traditional friendship and relationship resilient because of the people connectivity, the cultural and people connectivity. So that is something that we need to further enhance in terms of education, capacity building, exchange programs. And now the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Cambodia has established a training center that my colleagues from NIDIA, the National Institute of Diplomacy International Relations. So this is important. Perhaps we can explore in terms of strengthening people-to-people ties by linking young diplomats between the two countries, capacity building, exchange program, and so on. So my conclusion here is there's a big room, huge potential for both countries to utilize, to make use of our political trust and political capital by investing more in economic and people-to-people ties. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chen, for your very interesting intervention, touching both upon the prospects for Russia's collaboration with ASEAN and also for Russian-Cambodian relations. And I think this is a very interesting, a very good point that we should use our political trust and political capital to tap into the bilateral collaboration potential in different areas, and these is including educational exchanges, and at the same time our political trust is reinforced by a very successful history of such educational exchanges. Now I'm happy to give floor to the next speaker from Russian side, Ekaterina Koldunova from GIMO University ASEAN Center and the Department of Asian and African Studies. Please, Ekaterina Valentina, the floor is yours.
First of all, thank you very much for organizing such a timely and interesting event. Thanks for inviting, and Your Excellencies, thanks for giving the directions to our today's discussion. Russia and Cambodia are, of course, different in terms of their scale, historical path of development, current model of political process, but they share many intersections in the past and in the present, and Dr. Masikov brilliantly pinpointed that turning points in our 20th century history of interactions. I think that we should focus on the areas which unite us with all the differences in mind. And as the first point here, I would like to raise the one that Russia has gone through the periods of very dramatic turmoils in the beginning of the past century and in the end of the 20th century. Cambodia has historical experiences of political and social fragmentations in the 1950s, then in the 1970s, 1980s, and both countries very well known, very well aware of what is the struggle for national independence, national security, and what does it mean to be in the search for appropriate models of development when nobody can advise you what is the right way, what is the wrong way, and you need to define it by yourself. Secondly, I would like to say that the historical experience of our countries make us more than aware of the simple fact that there is no pre-given developmental path. And we cannot say that we will move without any problems only towards democracy, or only towards economic development, or only towards social cohesion, and there will be no obstacles on this way. Unfortunately, there will be many, and we need to interact smoothly to better tackle them. The ups and downs on this way are now so frequent all over the world that nobody can even claim to have just one remedy for all problems. And in this respect, I think Russia very well understands what is going on in Cambodia, and equally we hope that Cambodia is very well aware of what kind of internal and external challenges Russia has been facing recently. The third point is that both Russia and Cambodia are very well aware of what the external interference is and how painful the problem of the border security might be, or how damaging external sanctions may be in times when countries badly need friendly economic environment to recover from the traumas of the past. I would not here go into much details about what kind of troubles Cambodia had to face in the 1980s and throughout the whole 1980s period. What kind of difficulties Cambodia had in the international organizations. But judging from that experience, I think that Cambodia has a very well understanding of what Russia has been experiencing now. Next is that both Russia and Cambodia have to adopt to a very fast changing international environment and to the complexities of the modern world, where new technologies are very well spread. They make external and internal dimensions very different to separate, and countries need to find the ways how to, well, not to oppress the developmental processes, but at the same time to secure its own sovereignty, to make sure that the information is spread safely, that people-to-people contacts are not disrupted. And there are many other interesting areas where we share similarities in view. I think climate risk governance, healthcare, economic development, they all are now impossible without international cooperation. But precisely at the moment when this international cooperation is in a dire need, we see multiple disruptances at all levels of the international system. And I don't foresee any positive developments in this way. So we need to double and redouble our efforts to work towards more positive environment in this area. Speaking about the regional level, I believe that Russia is truly interested in keeping ASEAN as a central and working mechanism of regional cooperation. President Van der Rijtjeng raised that issue of small states diplomacy and what can small states do so their voice is heard, their opinion is taken into consideration. I think that the only way towards this better inclusion is through the regional organizations, regional and national institutions. And the more connections we have with individual member states of ASEAN, Cambodia is included, the better the overall situation in Russia-ASEAN cooperation will be, and the better we could mutually support each other. Political dialogue at the level of the prime ministers of Russia and Cambodia, cooperation within ASEAN and within the United Nations, movement towards a free trade area, highlighted by His Excellency Seylaid, are important stepping stones on this way. Finally, I think that the post-COVID-19 recovery is an important area for our bilateral cooperation and cooperation according to the lines of Russia-ASEAN Dialogue Partnership, which celebrates its double anniversary this year. On the second track dialogue, people-to-people contacts and educational exchanges, I think that we need to think very carefully how we could restore the level of educational cooperation we had previously in the past, and to move towards enhancement in this area. As the interesting avenues for further development, I think we can cast here blue economy, which ASEAN prioritizes this year. And we can here use the experience of Russia-Vietnam cooperation, for example. Water management, I think, is a timely issue, and I hope to see more Russian initiatives in this sphere. And generally, I think that we need to fully unfold the opportunities of Cambodia as a country coordinator for Russia-ASEAN cooperation, as I assume Cambodia will be taking over Indonesia. So thank you for your attention, and thanks for the opportunity to speak up.
Thank you so much, Ekaterina Valentina, for such a comprehensive speech highlighting both the points and issues that bring together Russia and Cambodia politically, the opportunities and the potential and shared agenda for both countries multilaterally within the international situation, and also aligning the promising tracks for further bilateral collaboration, such as blue economy, which I think hasn't been mentioned yet today. Thank you so much once again. And now I'm happy to give floor to the next representative of the Cambodian side, Dr. Phea Kim, Director General of International Relations Institute, Royal Academy of Cambodia. Please, the floor is yours.
Yes, good afternoon. I have to turn off my video because the internet here is too slow because it is raining hard here. Good afternoon from Cambodia. Professor Andre Kotunov, Director General of the Russian International Affairs Council. Your Excellency Anatoly Borovik, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the Russian Federation to the Kingdom of Cambodia. Your Excellency Ed Seyla, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the Kingdom of Cambodia to the Russian Federation. All distinguished experts, panelists, Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, and distinguished guests. It is my great honor to be part in this webinar. It is a very great honor for me. I would like to express my sincere thanks to the Russian International Affairs Council for inviting me to this very special webinar to commemorate the 65th anniversary of diplomatic relations between the Kingdom of Cambodia and Russian Federation. I would also like to express my warmest thanks to the Russian Embassy in Phnom Penh for facilitation and arrangement for this important event as well. And thank you for giving me the floor. I would like to take this opportunity to make a very short remark on the overview of the Cambodia-Russia relation over the 65 years. I agree with all previous speakers with regard to the relation between the two countries. We know that Cambodia and Russia relations have been impacted by national and international politics. If we talk about Cambodia-Russia relation, I would like to focus on the historical perspective. We can divide the relation between the two countries into a 6 major periods. The first period is from 1956 to 1970. The second one is from 1970 to 1975. And the third one is from 1979 to 1991, and from 1991 to 1993, and from 1993 to present. Our previous speakers cover a lot of my points, so I just make some reflection of the relation between the two countries from 1993 to present by focusing on some aspects. Politically, Cambodia and Russia are well-trusted partners with good cooperation politically while addressing common issues and problems that arise globally. In the regions, both states are cooperating within various international and regional structures, including active interaction in the UN and its bodies and ASEAN platforms. Diplomatically, that we can see that frequent exchanges of high-level visits took place during 2015 and 2016. In 2015, there were many noticeable official visits of Cambodian leaders to Russia, including the visit of former Foreign Minister Hau Nam Hong in March, Deputy Prime Minister Sok An, Deputy Prime Minister Sok Kheng in May, and Minister of Environment Sai Samal in October. More importantly, the first visits of the Prime Minister of Russia to Cambodia in November 2015, and Prime Minister Hun Sen was in Russia in May 2016 for the first time in 30 years, marked the new age of the relation. Economically, we can see that the trade between the two countries has risen substantially over the last decade. According to the Russian Federal Customs Services, the import to Russia from Cambodia last year, a total more than 200 million US dollars, and export from Russia to Cambodia was nearly 10 million US dollars. I think this is not that high, that the two countries have to do more to improve the trade relation. In terms of people to people, we can notice that more than 60,000 tourists from Russia visit Cambodia every year, and there is a lot of significant number of Russian expats in Cambodia as well, mostly living in Phnom Penh, in Siem Reap and Sihanoukville. More importantly, that we have to be very grateful to the Russia and also former Soviet Union for giving our students to study in Russia Now we can see that more than 8,000 Cambodians who study in former Soviet Union and in Russia since 1979. Now many of them hold senior position in the royal government of Cambodia, including Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Economy and Finance, Orpon and Minister of Education, also educated in Russia as well. And one more thing is that during the meeting of the ambassador of Russia to Cambodia with Prime Minister Hun Sen, they also talk about the Sputnik 5, is a Russian vaccine, and we hope that Russian will give the positive answer to the Cambodian request of Russian vaccine. So in my conclusion, Cambodia and Russia are connected by ties of traditional friendship and long-standing mutual respect. The two countries have close approaches to issues of the world order. Russia and Cambodia accumulated considerable experience of cooperation throughout all these years. The two countries interacted fruitfully in the world arena. It is quite clear that over the 65 years, Cambodia-Russia traditional friendship has gone from strength to strength in various fields. However, the bilateral trade volume is not very high, and Cambodia request of COVID-19 vaccine from Russia is not yet confirmed. So from my idea, in order to extend broad relations with Cambodia as well as with Southeast Asia in terms of politics and economy, it is strongly recommended that Russia should consider the possibility of investment in energy sector as well as gas, petroleum, agricultural sector, as former Soviet Union had made during the Cold War. The restoration of traditional relations with former Soviet Union with other countries in the region concerning human resource, industry, military affairs, cultural promotion. In addition, I think that Russia should play more important role in fighting against COVID-19. I strongly believe that the relation between the two countries would continue to grow stronger and stronger and diversify into numerous areas of common interest. Our solidarity in addressing pressing international challenges, salute experience in bilateral dialogue, acceleration of all-level contacts on different platforms, deeply rooted mutual understanding and respectful approach will undoubtedly navigate us to a greater achievement of both nationally and globally. May I conclude my remark by thanking the Russian International Affairs Council and Russian Embassy in Phnom Penh for having me in this important event. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Director General Kim, for your very interesting intervention, and that you touched upon not only on the friendship values between Russia and Cambodia, but also recommended that the two countries pay more attention to bilateral trade and economic collaboration, highlighting such areas as energy and agriculture, and also, of course, amid the global pandemic, global health and collaboration in medicine and the vaccine distribution is really a priority area, including for Russia and Cambodia, of course. Thank you so much. And before we go on to the next speaker, I would like to remind the audience that follows us live on YouTube and Facebook that you can ask questions in the chat section, and I think we will have enough time to read them out and have a bit of discussion with our distinguished speakers. So please don't hesitate to ask anything if you have any questions. And now I'm happy to give floor to our next speaker, Ivan Timofeyev, Director of Programs, Russian International Affairs Council. Please, Ivan Nikolaevich, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chairman. Your Excellencies, dear colleagues, good afternoon. It's a pleasure and privilege to speak today at our meeting. And I'm very glad that we managed to organize it despite all of the obstacles connected to COVID-19. And indeed, this is not the first meeting which composes the cooperation between our sides. I remember that in October 2019, we managed to, and we had a privilege to have a Minister of Education of Cambodia at RIAC, who gave a brilliant speech for our experts and for our members. So that was sort of a starting point of our cooperation, and I'm glad that that impulse is now being implemented into bigger cooperation and discussion on the issues of bilateral relations, regional affairs, and the global context. So I would start with a couple of words on the international context of our relations, which is getting more and more turbulent. One of the pivotal elements of the changing of the existing international order is increasing competition and, if not rivalry, between the United States and China. And this increasing competition will affect the international relations globally. It has different dimensions: military, technological, and even humanitarian. So it will increasingly affect the regional policy, taking into account that Asia-Pacific region would be the bedrock of the increasing rivalry of the two powers, but not only the Asia-Pacific region, but increasingly all many other regions as well. And there are different dimensions of this competition. One of them is the one of technology, when the United States is trying to force other countries to abstain from Chinese technologies or Chinese-related technologies, and China would increasingly do the same for its partners, and we will face this politicization of technological realm in the nearest future with very high probability. Another issue is sanctions, and sanctions which forces different international players to diversify their financial assets. So we may face the attempts of great powers to rely on their own financial systems to abstain from the use of dollar, and this may have economic consequences in the short-term range and in the mid and long-term perspective. So this is a kind of a risk both for Russia and Cambodia, right? Taking into account that Russia faces sanctions of the United States as well. So as for our bilateral ties and the prospects of our cooperation, we have already mentioned COVID-19 and medical cooperation. So this is a backbone of the moment. This is something of top priority now. So Russia managed to introduce already at least three types of three vaccines. One of these vaccines, Sputnik V, has been successfully tested on a big sample of populations, and it is quite demanded globally. So I'm sure that that could be one of the paramount, one of the most important venue of our cooperation. So human lives is the top priority. Human lives of Cambodian people, of Russian people, of all the people, regardless the region, the nation, etc. So, and if Russia has a chance to promote this mission of humanity, well, it should take this opportunity. So another dimension, among others, which I would like to stress is, of course, education. So Cambodian students represent in the Russian universities. So we have a number of students. There is a good tradition of getting education in Russia of Cambodian students, and On the one hand, COVID-19 blocked this cooperation. However, it turns out that it opens new opportunities. So we have a number of colleagues from GIMO, for instance, today here, and I'm teaching at GIMO too. So the university managed to very successfully adopt its educational program to the distant learning, and these patterns of education would survive after COVID-19. So that's a kind of a new dimension of student exchange, which is much less expensive, which provides more flexibility for students. And I'm sure that Russian universities will adopt and maintain their distant programs for international students, and that will be a good opportunity for Cambodian students to get education, to increase their qualifications, etc. Needless to say that those Russian students who have an interest in the Southeast Asia, in Cambodia, they will also have big opportunities to get deeper into their Cambodian culture, education, and all of the related spheres. Well, of course, our trade relations have been significantly pressed by COVID-19. We have decreased numbers with all of our trade partners, and while inevitably statistics is not very promising for the coming months and for the coming year. However, COVID-19 would end at some point, and there is a demand among Russian public to travel abroad. So tourism is one of the important dimensions of our economic cooperation, and I'm sure that as far as COVID-19 limitations are getting less, the stream of the Russian tourists to Cambodia will get back to normality, right? So we already have a number of tourist destinations functional and restoring. So this is something which may be a kind of a low-hanging fruit for the restoration of our trade relations after the COVID-19. Of course, military cooperation, it has a long history. It has a history. There are foundations for it. We have agreements. We have plans. Of course, they're also affected. So all of the budgets of the nation states are pressed by COVID-19. A number of plans are halted, but still we have trust. There is trust. There is a practice of our cooperation in the military sphere, in the military supplies and providing of services. So this is another dimension which is quite promising too. So I really trust that these gloomy times would pass soon, and we will be able to get to normality as fast as it is possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ivan Nikolaevich, for highlighting the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. We are more than a year now into the pandemic, for highlighting its impact on the Russia-Cambodian relations, and not only the negative influence, but also the opportunities it opens up for our collaboration. Now I'm happy to give floor to the next speaker from the Cambodian side, Director of the National Institute of Diplomacy and International Relations, Tian Samnang. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you for having me in this roundtable discussions. Good afternoon from Cambodia. Good afternoon, the distinguished speakers and guests. To begin with, I wish to sincerely thank the Russian International Affairs Council, or IAC, and His Excellency Anatoly Borovic, Ambassador of the Russian Federation to Cambodia, for organizing the online roundtable discussion on the Cambodia-Russia 65 years of diplomatic relation and and for inviting me to this notable event. This high-level discussion could not have come at a better time to commemorate the 65th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between Cambodia and Russia. And I strongly hope that we could grasp this opportunity to share and listen to each other's views on how we can improve and strengthen the relation of our two countries. The four proposed topics of this event are timely, especially in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic, that we shall build stronger ties to unite or to prevail over its impact on our social and economic fabrics. Given time constraint, I will try to keep my talk short and straight to the point. First, concerning to the 65 years of Cambodia-Russia diplomatic relation, traditional first cooperation and the path forward. In this topic, I will focus mainly on three aspects, being the first on the brief history of traditional relation between Cambodia and Russia. Second, I will touch on the present cordial tie of our two countries in the field of economic partnership, defense and security, and other related field of cooperation. As Ambassador Anatoly Borovic has just mentioned, the diplomatic relation between Cambodia and Russia has been around for 65 years and dates back to May 1956, flourishing with its long history of friendship and a strong, fruitful cooperation. And the development of the relation with former Soviet Union grew more significant and reflect the frequent visit of the USSR, His Majesty Norodom Sihanouk, the late King Father of Cambodia. And with this strong tie and friendship, many achievements were seen through the substantial assistance provided by the USSR during the 1960s to Cambodia on the establishment of, among other, I recall Khmer-Soviet Friendship Hospital, which is still playing a significant role in contributing to the good health of many Cambodian people throughout the country. And another is the Institute of Technology, we call in Khmer Sala Techno, as well as other integral infrastructure development. In economic sphere, it's worth recalling that the two countries have a long-standing good relation and a strong cooperation, and with that 51 bilateral agreements and memorandum of understanding have been signed in many areas, including investment bank, agriculture, environment, security, and around 14 agreements of MOU being negotiated, heading a call on areas of education, law, youth, and tourism. I personally do agree with His Excellency Ambassador Itzila and His Excellency Kinpia that agro-industry, energy, and tourism are a potential sector for enhancing economic cooperation between our two countries. Bilateral military cooperation is also steadily developing since 2007. The Russian military ship have docked in Cambodia 4 times, and with at least one being in 2018, as the 3 Russian warships commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Olyan Korolev, commander of Russian Navy to Pacific region, docked at Sihanouk port. On top of that, both sides have also exchanged visits and held numerous meetings discussing on strengthening closer military ties through military scholarship training, technical military assistance, especially on Cambodia demining operation, as well as joint effort to combat terrorism and cybercrime. On health sectors, as I mentioned earlier, regarding the establishment of a Khmer-Soviet Friendship Hospital, it significantly contributes to the development of health in Cambodia. In retrospect, I would like to thank the government of the Russian Federation for allocating funds from the federal budget in 2017 to prepare a feasibility study of project allocating for the modernization of the Soviet Friendship Hospital. As you might have already heard that during the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Khmer Soviet Friendship Hospital from the onset have been designated to treat COVID-19 patients. And Russia is also our close partnering country to assist medical equipment and supply for those in treatment and prevention of COVID-19 to Cambodia. To wrap up the topic, I am hoping and optimistic about the future between our two countries through our past and present fight, building the foundation for the strengthening and expanding our bilateral relation with the attempt to especially revitalize our economy and bolster investment in post-COVID-19. Regarding the Cambodia-Russia relation in a broader regional context, ASEAN, EAEU, and other international platform, as the title suggests, this is a broad topic that requires more time to go through all the detail. And in this regard, I wish to underline only the ASEAN-Russia relation and the Cambodia-EAEU relation with regard to Russia. Asian-Russian relation could be traced back to 1991 when Russia became a sectoral dialogue partner of ASEAN and later was elevated to a full dialogue partner in 1996. In recent development, Russia was accredited to be a strategic partnership in 2018 during the third ASEAN-Russia summit in Singapore. Cambodia-EAEU relation. The Eurasian Economic Union, we call it EAEU or EEU, is an economic union of a member state which include Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Russia. And the Eurasian Economic Union has integrated a single market of 180 million people and a gross domestic product of over $5 billion. And the union encouraged the free movement of goods and services and provide for common policy in the macroeconomics world, transport, industry, and agricultural, energy, foreign trade and investment, custom, technical regulation, competition, and antitrust regulation. Cambodia export around $150 million worth of goods to EAEU country between 2013 and 2016. And importantly, $21.5 million worth of product from the EAEU during the same period. And at this point, I share the view with His Excellency Vanarut that Cambodia will be meaningful of a member of EAEU, but as a bridge between ASEAN and EAEU as well. Next on Russia, Cambodia, and strategic rebalancing in Asia Pacific, convergence or divergence. On this topic, I'm afraid that I have very little say. However, what I can share my view is that the contemporary global geopolitics trend have been now shifted to the Asia Pacific region, and where the mighty power country leads, and thereby bringing about political rivalry, divergence to serve their respective political and economic agenda. And Cambodia, we are a small state country. We are adhering to our neutral and non-aligned foreign policy and wish to remain friend with the principle of equality, mutual benefit, and shared responsibility. In addition, I believe that peaceful dialogue and reciprocity will create trust and mutual understanding in any situation between the counterparts. Finally, regarding to expert level dialogue, education, and people-to-people exchange, room for enhancement. As I mentioned earlier, that dialogue is critical important to discuss our discrepancy and make a compromise for our reciprocal benefits. Cooperation on education, culture, and people-to-people exchange critical imperative for building mutual understanding and therefore compelling strong development between countries and countries. At the present, most of our high-ranking officials got their degree from USSR, and I am indeed delighted that there is the MOU on the establishment of the Asian Center within MGIMO University was signed in 2009 with a specific aim to promote youth contact and their exchange of information, which goes to show the importance of education, cultural and social exchange. As speaking of youth on 8 December 2020, I was invited to be one of the speakers of sustaining the youth contact and propose new model and form of cultural and youth diplomacy between ASEAN and Russia, which is organized by Moscow State Institute Relation of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. To this end, I would like to conclude my presentation of the 4 topics, and thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Director Tian, for your broad intervention that touched upon all the subjects, and thank you so much for a detailed description of the EAEU prospects and developing relations with Cambodia and more broadly ASEAN. And now I'm happy to give floor to the next participant from the Russian side, Evgeny Kanaev, head of the Asia Pacific Department at the Higher School of Economics. Please, Evgeny Alexandrovich, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairperson. Thank you so much indeed. My dear friends, can you hear me well?
Yeah, we can hear you well.
Okay, well, we are discussing a remarkable event, and let me add some criticism to our discussion, since I believe true friends should be honest to each other. But this criticism is not just for the sake of criticism itself. This is about some points and about some steps that we should, points we should address, and the steps that we should take. Well, in my opinion, relations between Russia and Cambodia cannot be characterized as a bed of roses, since 3 fundamental things are missing. The first thing has to do with the bilateral dimension, and this is about lack of regionalization. This is about lack of people-to-people contacts, enterprise-to-enterprise contacts, links between enterprises and financial structures, links between individual entrepreneurs. Also, Russia doesn't have diasporas, recognizable brands and mass production goods in Cambodia. And I'm driving at a very simple conclusion that the grassroots cooperation is conspicuously missing. And in order to change the situation, Cambodia has to completely reorient its industrial policy to Russia. And I have a very simple question. Does Cambodia really need it? And here, friends, I would add the following thing. In the business-to-business sector, the transactions costs are very high, and in case Cambodian enterprises have already developed workable and efficient links with, for example, enterprises from China or Japan, for them to change their corporate policy and for the country as a whole to change its industrial policy may be prohibitively costly. And with a specific relevance to the regional dimension, I would say that Russia doesn't participate in the institutions of cooperation, which matter for a successful regionalism. Russia favors neutrality, inclusivity, and the positive global after effects of multilateral cooperation, but at the same time, we see now Sino-American contradictions over technological and trade issues and the global after effects of the SCO, to which Cambodia is displaying a strong interest. The global after effects may be not as impressive as they might seem, because the key difference, for example, between the SCO and the ASEAN Regional Forum is very simple. The participants of SCO at the very beginning were able to resolve their territorial issues. And we know that SCO has emburdened itself with Sino-Indian contradictions, with contradictions between India and Pakistan, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization as a multilateral cooperation, once again, may not be as efficient as it might seem. And here to see it as a link between Russia and Cambodia in some form or another may be premature at best. And apart from it, I do not share the view and the optimism that the Eurasian Economic Union can be a link between Russia and Cambodia, since the Eurasian Economic Union lacks a very important component, the trade processing chains. And this is not about supply production chains between assembling factories, for example, like Japan created all around Southeast Asia. This is about workable chains and workable contacts between producers, distributors, and retailers. And this is what is missing at the Eurasian Economic Union level, not to say about its external connections. And with relevance to the global side of things, let me tell you this, that at present we see a high degree of politicization of, for example, digital cooperation and cooperation related to the health sector. And here I completely agree with Ivan Timofeyev, who mentioned that the situation is too serious and is very serious, and there are many important points to consider. And at present, China is trying to add the social dimension to its digital policy. China is trying to link the digital Silk Road and the health Silk Road in the Asia-Pacific region, and specifically in Cambodia. And colleagues, suppose China constructs well, a large-scale factory, a large-scale plant in Cambodia, and I do not see any possibilities for the scenario that China constructs the hardware and Russia provides its software using its digital engineering school, etc. And in case China constructs all the material objects, it absolutely logically and absolutely predictably makes the following situation possible. In the cabinet of the director of this factory, his deputy, the main economist, the main specialist in security system. There are Chinese computers with Chinese software, and we shouldn't have any illusions about it, that China constructs all the material objects and simultaneously Russia may provide its software technologies to countries of the Asia-Pacific region, including to Cambodia. And finally, with a specific relevance to Russia's possibilities as the vaccine provider, let me remind you that so far Cambodia has approved 3 vaccines: Sinovac, Sinopharm, and, your attention please, AstraZeneca. And taking into consideration that these issues, all the issues embracing the coronavirus pandemic, are becoming very easily politicized, I see limited possibilities to initiate and to energize or re-energize this line of cooperation between Russia and its Asia-Pacific partners, including Cambodia. And finally, let me tell you this. As far as I can judge, the speakers who have been participating in our discussion have outlined 3 main spheres of cooperation between Russia and Cambodia, and these spheres are energy, agriculture, and tourism. This is exactly what we discussed before APEC summit in Vladivostok. And does it mean that we haven't gone too far in order to substantiate our foreign policy slogans with real practically oriented actions. And once again, colleagues, I'm driving at a very simple thing, that we should be realistic about what we can and what we cannot do, and we should also be realistic about what exists in the reality rather than in what we want to see. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kanaev, for giving such a maybe less optimistic perspective on the Russian-Cambodian relation, but I think it's also very important not to look only on the achievements and good bilateral experience, but also try to look at the problematic points to jointly try to search for the way forward and to resolve this issue. Thank you so much once again. And today we are also joined by the Russian Center of Science and Culture in Phnom Penh, and we will kindly ask our colleagues from the center to give their perspective and highlight the experience of work and the project that the Russian Center of Science and Culture is implementing in Cambodia. Please, Mr. Panbari, the floor is yours. Your audio is off. Please turn on your audio.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. His Excellency Ambassador Anatoly Borovic, His Excellency Ambassador Yetzila, His Excellency distinguished guests. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak about the education in Russia, as well as the preservation and development of the Russian language in Cambodia. I'm here with my colleague Natalia Nelivetsova, who is a Russian language teacher, as am I. And education in Russia is traditionally considered prestigious in Cambodia. This is primarily due to the help of the Soviet Union in post-war Cambodia, when Russian specialists came to assist in the reconstruction of the country, and young Cambodians had the opportunity to study at universities in Russia and the Union republics. Today, we continue to strengthen these ties. So in 2019, the government of the Russian Federation and the Kingdom of Cambodia signed an agreement on the mutual recognition of education, qualifications, and academic degrees, which will expand the cooperation in the field of education and science of the two countries. Cambodia students study at the Russian universities, including under the government quotas. The most popular specialties are general medicine, nuclear energy and thermal physics, construction, aviation engineering, and international relations. As His Excellency mentioned before, that more than 8,000 Cambodians were educated in Soviet universities, and now they occupy the main position in the Cambodian government, take part in the development of the country. The quality of Russian education is very high, and appreciate the cooperation between our countries in this area, as His Excellency Hong Chunaron, Cambodian Minister of Education, once said. The Russian Center for Science and Culture in Phnom Penh holds many activities to increase interest in Russian culture and popularize the Russian language. During the meetings of the leadership of the Russian Center of Science and Culture with the heads of government organization, many important issues are raised about the possibility of developing cooperation in the field of education, in particular about the possibility of obtaining quotas for education in sports universities and colleges in Russia. Because today in Cambodia, there are no sports faculties in any universities. In Cambodia, there is an urgent need for the training of specialists in the field of sports management and teachers of physical education and sports. Russian secondary specialized education is at high level too. Here in Cambodia, there is a need for qualified personnel trained in technical schools and colleges. It should be noted that interest of young people in Russian culture and study and the Russian language is directly proportional to the volume of quotas for the education in Russian Federation. We regularly hold conferences organized by the State Atomic Energy Corporation, Rosatom, concerned with the participation of large technical universities. We invite Cambodian applicants to the acquainted with the conditions of the study in Russia. We assist them in the preparing of documents for admission. Russian language courses are organized based on the Russian Center of Science and Culture. But these courses are not enough to successfully promote Russian education and strengthen the position of the Russian language in Cambodia. In the tourist capital of the country, Siem Reap City, today there are about 100 Russian-speaking guides. The Ministry of Tourism of the Kingdom of Cambodia considers the education of Russian-speaking guides, training and refresher courses to be an important and necessary area of cooperation. We, staff members of the Russian Center for the Science and Culture, are working to expand our presence in large cities of Cambodia and hope to soon significantly increase interest in learning Russian language, which will increase the Cambodians' interest in Russian education, as well as promising cooperation with the Russian companies working in the field of tourism and the application of their knowledge for the development of their country. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Mr. Panbury. I think all of the speakers previously mentioned the importance of exchanges in culture, education, science in Russian-Cambodian relations. And thank you so much for your specific description of the current state of the relation and the endeavors and the initiatives that the Russian Center in Phnom Penh is now taking upon in order to promote this type of collaboration. And now we have one speaker left for the program. Last but not the least, I'm happy to give floor to Elena Burova from the Institute of Far Eastern Studies. Please, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. As I specialize on economic development of Cambodia, I would like to add some words about the economic relations between the two countries. Despite positive dynamics, the bilateral cooperation in the economic sphere lags significantly behind the political one and remains at a low level. The position of Cambodia was 101st among the trade partners of Russia. Its share in the trade turnover of the Russian Federation was equal to 0.3%. Russian share in Cambodian trade wasn't essential as well. It was equal 0.1%. If we consider the structure of trade, it can be noted that it does not fully reflect the comparative advantages of the two countries and reveal the potential of trade relations. I will shortly give you 3 examples. For example, rice is Cambodia's largest agricultural export commodity. Rice export is increasing year by year. At the same time, the share of Russian market in Cambodian rice export is only 0.5%. As for share of Cambodian rice in Russian rice imports, it doesn't exceed 2%. The biggest part of Cambodian rice export goes to China and Europe because there is trade preferential. Yes, for sure, we should take into account the weakness of Cambodian rice processing industry. That is an interesting sphere for capital investment. Cambodia produces a huge volume of rice each year, but due to the lack of rice milling capacity, huge volume of rice in the form of paddy goes to neighboring countries. As His Excellency said, the investment in rice processing industry is a top priority of Cambodian government. So the investment to rice processing industry in Cambodia could be interesting and mutually advantageous for both countries. A similar example is a wheat trade between two countries. Russia is one of the biggest exporters of wheat in the world. Wheat consumption in Cambodia has a tendency to increase. At the same time, the Russian share of wheat imports is 3%. As well, fertilizers figure prominently in Russian export, but their share in the bilateral trade is quite small, bearing in mind that the fertilizers consumption is relatively low in Cambodia. It's about 33 kilograms per hectare. So the bilateral trade structure stands far from the potential both countries have. Before COVID-19, the number of Russian tourists tend to increase, but there are no direct flights to Cambodia from Russia. This prevents tourism development between two countries. And tourism is the most important export of service in Cambodia. Those are only few examples, but in brief, Russian-Cambodian bilateral relations in economy far from the potential both countries have. The bilateral cooperation could develop and should develop on the basis of comparative advantages of each country. There is a huge room for improvement. Thank you very much for invitation and for the opportunity to speak up.
Thank you so much, Elena, for your very interesting introduction, touching upon the specificities of Russia-Cambodia economic collaboration. I think previous speakers mentioned a lot about general points, maybe about the trade and economy, but thank you so much for your input concerning, for example, and first and foremost, the agricultural prospects for Russia-Cambodia collaboration. We now have around 20 or 30 minutes left for an open discussion, and we have already received a couple of questions from the audience. And I think I will start by reading out the two questions from the audience, and please feel free to ask your own questions or answer to the questions of the audience by lifting your hand or indicating in the chat that you would want to speak during the discussion. The first question is addressed to the Russian speakers, and it is: what is Russian policy in the 21st century concerning Indo-Pacific? And the second question is addressed to Cambodian speakers. It's a question by Valeria Vershina, a PhD student of the McGill University. And as a coordinator of the Russia-ASEAN Dialogue Partnership, what are Cambodia's priorities? So it's a question addressed to Cambodian speakers. So please, maybe one of the, we will start with one of the Cambodian speakers to answer about Cambodia's priorities as a coordinator for Russian ASEAN dialogue. Maybe could I ask, please, maybe Mr. Vanerit Chen to start answering the question.
So sorry, it's not so clear.
So the question is, what are Cambodia's priorities as the country coordinator of the Russia-ASEAN Dialogue Partnership?
Okay, so there's several priorities here, ranging from political security to economic and social cultural. But since Cambodia has prioritized economic diplomacy, I think the economic pillar will be the top priority, followed by political security and social cultural. And in this regard is the implementing the regional comprehensive partnership, of which we hope that the parliaments of all the 15 signatories will ratify this year. Next year, start implementing. ASEAN will be a critical kind of economic integration boost in this region. So when it comes to the ASEAN external relationship, recall this, that when Cambodia was a chair of ASEAN 9 years ago, 2012, Cambodia initiated what it is called ASEAN Global Dialogue to invite a different international partner from the UN, ADB, BOI, and other organizations to attend the ASEAN meeting, IMF and World Bank as well. So that initiative can be revived under the Cambodian chairmanship next year to expand the ASEAN leverage in shaping a multilateral institution. So ASEAN Global Dialogue, I think, can be revived as well. And when it comes to security issue, I think ASEAN countries are not interested in taking sides in this geopolitical competition or even decoupling. So they try to navigate through this geopolitical competition by enhancing what ASEAN initiative its own Indo-Pacific strategy, the ASEAN Indo-Pacific outlook. So that I think is the key kind of guidance, strategic guidance for ASEAN to maintain its central role in shaping security architecture. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chen, for answering the question concerning the ASEAN's, the Cambodia's priorities as the coordinator of Russia-ASEAN dialogue partnership. Now, for the second question concerning the Russia's Indo-Pacific strategy, I would ask Evgeny Kanaev to follow through.
Well, with a specific respect to Russia's attitude to the Asia-Pacific region, let me tell you this. Both Russian foreign policy analysts and Russian top politicians and opinion makers have been repeatedly critical about this project, this initiative, and I see at least three reasons for this position. The first reason has to do with, I would say, lack of consolidating agenda that the Indo-Pacific region as a multilateral project can offer its present and prospective participants. We all know that this project started in the earlier 2000s when the regional core group was organized, and since then it has been transformed into an anti-Chinese undertaking with a very clear mission to contain China's maritime activity. And frankly speaking, I do not see any other attempts to add possibly some consolidating components other than this anti-Chinese agenda as the key mission of the Indo-Pacific region. The second point has to do with the economic side of things. Much has been said that the Indo-Pacific region is very promising from the economic perspective, but we should be clear what we are speaking about. We are speaking about just seaborne trade, about just sea lanes of communication. But take, for instance, the already mentioned processes of regionalization and regionalism. There are no links between enterprises of, for example, the countries of South Asia and Southeast Asia, as well as linkages between individual businessmen, between enterprises and financial structures, etc. And perhaps revealingly that India withdrew from the regional comprehensive economic partnership since India understood that in its present form it was against rather than in favor of Indian interests. And most importantly, the Indo-Pacific region doesn't offer its participants the presently very much appreciated direction of cooperation, regional connectivity. And as far as I'm informed, the sums, the money that is required to cover the infrastructure expenses, the sum accounts for $50 trillion to the year 2040, and it's absolutely unclear which country from the Indo-Pacific from the Quadrilateral Defense Cooperation Group is ready to cover these expenses. India or Japan? In my opinion, very unlikely. Australia, well, it doesn't meet all the necessary requirements to construct infrastructure in South Pacific. And with relevance to the United States, I do not see any prospects for Washington to agree to finance, to throw money away, financing these large-scale infrastructure projects. And possibly most importantly, the Indo-Pacific region in its present form lacks the institutional foundation, because the ASEAN-centric institutions do not embrace all the participants of the Indo-Pacific, the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, while the Indian Ocean Rim Association doesn't have, for example, Japan or South Korea or even China as its participants. And it's also unclear, I would say, which specific mission this institution will have to offer its members. For example, we remember that APEC offered the Bago goals as well as the Osaka action plan, concentrating upon free trade and investment, fostering technological exchanges and improving conditions for doing business. And I do not see any such things in case we are discussing the Indo-Pacific region. And colleagues, possibly most revealingly, people who know, I would say, the money's worth are not optimistic about the new term. For example, the World Bank operates still the term East Asia and Pacific, the International Monetary Fund, Asia and Pacific, the Food and Agriculture Association, Asia and the Pacific, and you won't find there the term in the Pacific, because people who know the money value, who know the money worth, do not see any economic or commercial prospects in this presumable or artificial region, which is referred to as the Asia-Pacific region. Possibly my colleagues will continue my line of arguments, because I know that many of them write extensively on this subject, or possibly they can disagree with me, but as far as I can judge, this is, well, there is nothing to discuss seriously, just because it doesn't possess the key components, a truly workable and a truly efficient solvent multilateral dialogue initiative, multilateral dialogue platform, or multilateral initiative should possess, in my opinion.
Thank you so much, Evgeny Alexandrovich, for your detailed touch upon the Indo-Pacific initiative. It's been really widely discussed this last couple of years, including in Russia. And now we know that Ambassador Borovic wanted to speak in the discussion. Please, Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I would like to touch upon three topics. The first one, the economic and commercial investment cooperation between Russia and Cambodia. We understand now that the volume of our bilateral trade is pretty modest. So, but we see that we have potential for increasing the commercial and investment exchanges between our countries. For several months, we have been monitoring the Cambodian market, and we suggest that there are a lot of promising places for the Russian export. Last time we have received many requests from the middle-sized Russian companies to assist them to establish the direct contacts of cooperation with Cambodian partners, and we have organized several online conferences between our businessmen, and we do hope that this interconnection will be continued upon the stabilization of the epidemic situation in our countries and resuming the regular air traffic, which led us to organize the exchange with the delegation of the businessmen of two countries. So the second one topic, which was mentioned by Honorable Kimper, the procurement of Russian vaccine to the Kingdom of Cambodia. So I would like to clarify about the development of this issue. So after the discussion of this topic with Samdech Prime Minister Hun Sen, we tried to organize the direct contact between Russian fund for direct investment responsible for the international distribution of this vaccine, and the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Economy and Finance of the Kingdom of Cambodia. And at last, we have organized such webinar with the participation of the Russian Fund and the Ministry of Health Cambodia and the Ministry of Economy and Finance, and the Russian Embassy was also one of the participants of the discussion. From the Russian company, it was proposed that the comprehensive explanation about the terms and conditions and the advantages of Russian vaccine. And they also answered all the questions from of Cambodian partners. And we agreed to organize the working group for further promotion of this topic and discussing the concrete question of the possible supply of Russian vaccine to Cambodia. But so far, we still looking forward to the decision of the Cambodian side on this issue. But to my mind, we haven't exhausted all the possibility in the establishing of the productive cooperation between the Russian Federation and the Kingdom of Cambodia in containing the spread of the coronavirus infection. So, but I would like to confirm from our side, we are ready at any time to be in touch with Cambodian partners and discuss this issue and trying to find the mutually beneficial format of such cooperation between our two countries. So we will also be ready to organize another webinar with the Russian Fund for Direct Investment. So, and I would like to tell you that we have conveyed all the materials, all the necessary information. We are very open in this regard to the Cambodian friends. So we do hope that we will continue our interaction. So because Cambodia is our friend, and so we enjoyed our friendly and long-standing relations between our countries. So the other issue, the coming traditional Cambodian New Year. So I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate our Cambodian friends with the traditional New Year and to wish peace, stability, prosperity, safety, and the total victory of Cambodia over the coronavirus. So, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for your speech, and thank you also so much for the description of the embassy's work and the contacts of the Russia and Cambodia concerning the vaccine, because it's really one of the topical issues now, given we are still amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. We have one more small question. I'm not sure whether it's rhetoric or not from the audience. It's a question about the direct flight between Phnom Penh and Moscow, because one of the participants who follows us live on Facebook dreams of visiting Russia, and I think it's one of the good indication of remaining goodwill and mutual interest in Russian and Cambodian relations. We still have a little time, so if a bit of time. So if any of the distinguished speakers has any remarks or anything to add in the discussion, please feel free to turn on your mic and continue with the discussion, or else we'll probably calling it an end. So,
hello, can I add
yes,
comments?
sure.
Because
sure.
I think the question for me is ASEAN, Russia. So, but my response was ASEAN in general. So sorry for that. I did not take the question. So when it comes to ASEAN and Russia, because 2021 and 2025 will be a next 5 years action plan, and Cambodia as the coordinating countries of ASEAN Russia, we work on developing this 5 years plan roadmap. And I expect that the roadmap will be very comprehensive, ranging from different area of cooperations, and it's to provide a better, a kind of more effective way to promote the bilateral relationship between Russia and ASEAN. So I think the next 5 years roadmap will be the core task of Cambodia as a coordinated country, working closely with Russia And as I said, I think the economic cooperation will consume a big portion. It is a comprehensive cooperation. And of course, I echo the comments by previous speaker with regard to the post-COVID recovery. So I think it may take 4 to 5 years for economic recovery in the post-pandemic era. So that the Russian role in this post-pandemic recovery in Southeast Asia will be critical. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Chan, for your remarks. Final remarks. Maybe our Russian or Cambodian speakers would also like to add something to end the discussion. So I think nobody has anything more to add. So from my part and from the part of the Russian International Affairs Council, I would like to thank all the Russian and Cambodian speakers that took such an active part and took such a great interest in our discussion and find an opportunity to join us today. And it was our honor to be joined by the two ambassadors who found time and opportunity to speak about the bilateral relation on the platform of the Russian International Affairs Council. And with that, I give the floor to Director General of the Russian International Affairs Council, Andrei Kochenov, for the short final remarks. Please, Andrei Vladimirovich.
Thank you, Ksenia. I think that definitely we had a very intense and very honest exchange of opinions. I'm glad that it was not a kind of mutual admiration discussion, but rather a very sober deliberation on the problems, not just on the accomplishments of the bilateral relationship. I do hope that this conversation will continue, and definitely we should not ignore the problems that exist in the bilateral relationship, including the problems that exist in the economic domain. Definitely, Russia is not in a position to compete actively with China for the Cambodian markets. It's clear that Russia has to find its own role and its own place in the Southeast Asia in general, in Cambodia in particular. But I think that one of the natural conclusions of today's discussion is that this conversation should continue. We should probably get deeper into specific areas of our cooperation. I would also suggest that we should compare notes on developments in the Southeast Asia, but also in a more general way on the concept of Indo-Pacifics, for example, on the prospects for the Chinese-American competition, and on many other issues which will definitely affect our two countries. So let me once again thank all the participants on behalf of our council, and let me confirm once again that this topic will remain in the focus of our attention. We are open to various ideas for cooperation, maybe for joint papers and reports that we can generate together with our partners in Cambodia. So let's stay in touch and let us continue the dialogue that we launched today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your participation. And I would also thank once again the Embassy of Russia to Cambodia and the Embassy of Cambodia to Russia for their support for this event. Thank you so much.
New Year to all Cambodian friends on the occasion of the coming New Year.
Thank you so much. See you.